Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sake Revolution. This is America's first sake podcast. I'm your host, John Puma from the Sake Notes, administrator of the Internet Sake Discord, the guy on the show who's not a sake samurai, and just an old-fashioned sake nerd just like you.
And I'm your host, Timothy Sullivan. I am the sake samurai, the sake educator, as well as the founder of the Urban Sake website. And together, John and I will be tasting and chatting about all things sake and doing our best to make it fun and easy to understand.
That's right, Tim. And today we're doing I believe this is our second in our series of U.S. sake brewers.
Yes, that's right. We have a very, very VIP special guest in the studio with us.
Oh, yes, in the studio with us. Right.
over the interwebs.
Yeah.
I want to welcome Yoshihiro Sako to Sake Revolution. Welcome, Yoshi. It's so good to have you.
Thank you, Timothy. Thank you for having me, John.
Fantastic. So you are the brewer at Den Sake Brewery in Oakland, California. And this is, as John mentioned, this is our second interview with a U.S. sake brewer. And we're so excited to have you with us today. To get started, why don't you give us a little bit of a self-introduction?
Yes, my name is Yoshihiro Sako. I'm a head brewer and the owner of Den Sake Brewery in Oakland, California. We established this brewery 2018, so it's been 2 years and a little bit. And currently, right now we produce about 250 cases every 2 months, something like that. And mainly locally, we distribute our sake by ourselves locally within Bay Area, including San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley. And we just started shipping within California. Yeah, that's about it.
Great. So professionally, what did you do before you got into making sake? Were you connected to the sake industry?
Yes, thank you for asking. I was going to tell this, but I forgot. Yeah, I was in the restaurant industry for a long time, more than 15 years in San Francisco. I was sake wine buyer, and I became a sake director at the restaurant called the Yuzuki Japanese Eatery in San Francisco. Then I also started teaching sake class when I was working in the restaurant, and I wanted to, gain more the sake knowledge. So, I was like, okay, maybe let's brew sake. And I did some apprenticeship at a couple of different breweries in Japan. And I came back to San Francisco. I felt like I needed to brew by myself. We decided to test brewing at my friend's backyard in the Bay Area. And it came out really good. So we got confident. So we kind of decided to go into sake brewing business. It's a big change. It's kind of easy to say, but it was kind of big change for me, but I'm enjoying it.
What made you go like, you know what? I want to try and brew some sake. I mean, obviously you made that call, but what was the seed that brought that on?
I was in the restaurant industry for a long time, and that kind of made me a little bit tired of being always kind of up against the toward the customers, and also I kind of need to work till super late. And I was actually playing music before I got into the restaurant industry. I was playing music. I was playing bass in several bands in the Bay Area, doing recording and some tours. And when I felt like a little bit tiring, like in a restaurant job, I still love going to the restaurant, but job-wise, I felt like it was time to move to something different. I really wanted to leave some creativity because I was used to just playing music, making music all the time. And so some creativity, and plus something I wanted to go into a little bit more introverted world. So I think shifting to the sake brewing business from restaurant work, I think it was kind of smooth shift, even though we had to struggle a little bit in the beginning, but it was kind of smooth shift mentally for me.
Wow. Yeah, I imagine that would be quite a shift. So you're making sake in the U.S. but you've got a lot of experience with styles of sake made in Japan. How would you say that U.S. made sake is developing stylistically, and how is that different from Japan made sake these days?
It's very hard to say because I haven't tried all the domestic sake yet. But for my case, I'm trying to make sake definitely pair well with the food here and the food that I eat everyday life. Brought sake into the restaurant, like a Californian cuisine or Italian cuisine restaurants, and I kind of pair sake with all those non-Japanese food or non-Asian food. And sometimes it's very successful, but at the same time, I felt like just the attack of the sake is, I felt like it's a little bit weaker than wine. And I love wine, and I drink a lot of wine too. So I just started to think, what's the difference between sake and wine? And as a lot of people knows, the biggest difference between sake and wine, that's kind of acidity. It's a big difference. Wine has much higher acidity, and the sake instead has a lot of more umami flavor based, a lot of times comes from amino acid. So that's a backbone of sake, the umami. And the backbone wine is more like acidity. And so that acidity, I always enjoy that acidity, even if I eat some kind of salad, and also, of course, meat, like a protein-rich food, fattier food. I always enjoy pairing food I eat with something a little bit acidic beverage. So I wanted to make sake with that acidity that pair well with the food here.
So Yoshi, where in Japan are you from?
I'm from Kanagawa Prefecture, next to Tokyo, Yokohama, and the Kamakura is in Kanagawa Prefecture.
One thought or question I kind of had was, you're a Japanese person making sake outside of Japan. Do you feel any advantage or disadvantage from being a Japanese person making sake outside of Japan?
Wow, interesting question. I think for me, it's easy to access all the, for example, thesis or some kind of, when I hit a problem when I'm brewing sake, I always check, I ask people, but also I can find a lot of thesis about the sake brewing because it's written in Japanese. So as a native Japanese, I can read all the Japanese. I think it's definitely, it's an advantage for me to get all the information about sake brewing. Disadvantage is it's opposite. Sometimes it's hard to communicate, for example, like a dealer or supplier, and it's just a habit. It's not only language, it's just a habit of doing the business. It's kind of a little different, Japanese mentality versus American mentality. It's a little bit different. So I need to adjust to the American way. And it's still not easy for me. Yeah.
What's the one thing that you would want Japanese people to know about U.S. made sake? Since you are making a slightly different style, you're making something that's a little bit more friendly for American food. What would be the lessons you'd want to take back when you're speaking to a Japanese person about sake that you make?
I think it's Japanese sake industry inside. It's very strict. I mean, I think those rating system about sake, it's very strict. And for example, like, have you heard about the things called the kigashu, the smell of the wood? It's like, I think it's inferior. I mean, it's inferior in the sake brewing, traditional sake brewing world in Japan. A lot of those kind of like things that Japanese people think that's inferior or it's a bad thing, it can be good here. And a lot of people here don't have those very strict, how can I say, regulation or rule of sake making. So I can more add those things to be considered like a bad in Japan. I think it's just a clean and super beautiful aromatic style sake, elegant style sake. It's not always, necessary to be always like that. I think we can add something kind of off flavor But if it's a little bit, it becomes kind of attraction. So that means in that sense, I just feel like brewing sake in United States, I think has much, kind of more possibility for me.
Yeah, well, talking about brewing sake in the US, I think that there must be some unique challenges to brewing sake in the US versus in Japan. As someone making sake over here in the US, what has surprised you or challenged you the most versus making sake in Japan?
Well, not so many choice for rice varietal, and of course, less sake rice here growing in the United States. And also equipment wise, there's no company sells sake brewing equipments here. So I definitely need to use something from a wine world or a beer world or something totally different. So equipment sourcing was, I think it was the hardest part for me.
So you had to improvise a little bit and like make things up as you went along. Did you build any of your own equipment?
Yeah, I built koji room, koji table, koji boxes, kaibo, the mixing pole, using Himalayan cedar and the bamboo.
They don't sell them at True Value Hardware down the street?
Exactly, no.
Strangely, they're not available at Home Depot. I don't know why.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think a lot of stuff I made by myself, and I enjoy it actually, those woodworking part as well.
Yeah. Well, one thing we all want is to grow the sake industry. You know, wherever you're making sake in the world, I think everyone wants this industry to grow. From your point of view as a sake maker, what do you think are some of the important things that need to be done in the industry to help the industry grow?
I think education is very important. I think, as you guys know, wine has been developed a very academic way, sommelier system, and a lot of those kind of like education system. I think that kind of education system it's lead a lot of people into more like serious drinker. Unfortunately, sake will not like developed like that, like wine. I think in Japan, those kind of academic way of introducing sake was not happening in Japan. And I think those are very strong, especially when I live in the United States. I feel the strengths of those academic power or academically understanding kind of like exposure. That's probably very powerful. But for some reason, when I'm in Japan, I didn't really feel it. And every time I go back to Japan, I don't really feel it. So people really don't use those academic way of enjoying like beverage in Japan, probably not as much as United States at least. But here, definitely those academic way is very important. So education is probably, I think, the most important part.
Mm.
Well, it is customary on our show here to drink sake. That's what we do on Sake Revolution. We talk about sake and then we drink sake a bit. And we are fortunate enough to have a few bottles shipped over here from California. It's Den batch number 11.
Great.
Yeah, I can give the stats that we have for this, Yoshi, and let you know the bottle that we have. And then as we taste it, maybe you can guide us a little bit through this. So this is a Junmai sake, single pasteurization. Its semi-bue or rice milling percentage is 70%. And the alcohol percentage here, it says 16.7. And the sake rice is calhikari rice.
Yep.
Ruin Forsman Ranch, that's the source of the rice. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and John and I are both drinking batch 11. So you have the batch labeled on all your sakes.
I love that, by the way.
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
So actually, I'm not very familiar with calhikari. Most of the North American breweries that I've encountered have been using either Calrose or sometimes they get Yamada Nishiki that's grown in the U.S. The calhikari is going to be a new experience for me.
I think we are the only one using calhikari rice to make sake. I think in the world. I think for now, and that's a crossbreed of koshihikari, akita komachi, and the cal rose.
Oh, wow.
But it was born in California.
Very interesting. I like that.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pour my sample of the Den Junmai Batch 11.
All right.
Please.
Now, I notice in the glass there is just a hint of some color here. Do you do charcoal filtering to your sake?
I don't.
Okay.
So muroka and almost genshu, but add a little water.
Now, the aroma is very subtle. It's not explosive and super, super bombastic aroma. Is that something you were going for, a little more restrained?
Yeah, just a little bit of aromatic character. That's what I want. And, I think it's easy to do the pairing. And if there's too much aroma, that's definitely picks only certain kind of food. But I think this can be much more versatile.
Well, giving it a first sip, one of the first things I notice is that there's a richness to the texture.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some sakes that have that restrained aroma are almost like water on the palate, and they're very light. Sakes from Niigata, for example, they're very light, clean. But this has a restrained aroma, but when it hits the palate, there's a richness, and it coats the palate a little bit, and there's a brightness on the finish. So I can see what you were talking about before, wanting to be more food friendly, and how this structure would stand up more to non-Japanese foods.
Wow, great description. Thank you.
Yeah. This shares a lot of qualities that we've encountered in other sakes that are very Western food friendly, and doing a really, I want to have dinner all over again.
Yeah.
This definitely comes across that way to me.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about the sweetness and dryness of this sake? For me, this batch 11, I don't know what the SMV is, but it's not coming across as that sweet at all.
Right.
The finish is nice and dry.
Yeah.
Is that what you were going for?
Yeah. One time I made a little bit sweeter style, but I think I tend to like dry style. And so this SMB is actually, it's a positive 3.3. But it feels like it's drier than that number, actually. And acidity level is 2.6, so it's pretty high acidity.
That probably adds to the perceived dryness a little bit, too.
Right. Yeah. I think so. So a lot of times, you guys probably know, but if the sake has super high acidity, usually they make it sweeter to balance it out. Like a good Riesling as well. Riesling has super high acidity, but instead, a lot of times, Riesling also becomes kind of sweeter to balance out. But I just didn't want just lots of sweetness. So I think for acidity of 2.6, it can be sweeter, but I made a little bit drier because I like drier style.
2.6 rating for acidity is much higher than you would normally find in Japan.
Right.
Yeah, that is very high.
I mean, on average, it would be usually between 1.0 and 2.0. Yeah. So going up to 2.6 is noticeably higher than the average style you'd get in Japan. And you mentioned before about your background studying wine and your love of wine. Do you think that higher acidity and the need and the want to pair with non-Japanese food, is that guiding that choice to have the acidity come out so much higher?
I think so. I strongly believe that. Yeah. And also, according to my Som friends, they also love the acidity. And some of them actually mentioned that they picked Den for their restaurant because of the acidity.
I think that a lot of North American sake brewers try to emulate that more floral, that more fruity, sweeter style. And I like that you're going in a different direction and saying, no, I want to make something that's drier. Something that's going to pair more aggressively with food. This is going to really go nicely with a lot of really good dishes. Is there anything in particular for this particular bottle that we have today that you would recommend pairing with?
Yeah. like pair well. I like drinking this with something like even if it's meat, like a chicken, or with the some kind of chimichurri sauce, something like gramolata sauce, or something like with a little acidity to it. If you put those sauce onto even like a steak or chicken, that pair really well together. And pesto sauce is pretty good with this sake as well.
Ooh, I've got some of that in the house, so might have to try that soon.
Yeah, and you're like ground zero. You're in Oakland, California. You have so much good food and great restaurants around you. It must be really fun to try your sake with all the different restaurants you have right in your neighborhood, right?
Yeah, it's really fun, and it's very. I really appreciate all those kind of support from especially local people, local restaurants, and we are close to Napa as well. So some of the Napa restaurants also carry Den and the pair with non-Japanese food. That's super exciting. And also my wife Lani, she's a half Japanese, half American, so she cooks a lot of different style of food. Sometimes the traditional Japanese and sometimes Californian influenced food, and those stuff every day. It's very enjoyable to drink sake with kind of new dish and just find out, wow, this dish really go well with my sake. It's really fun.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I've really enjoyed tasting your Junmai sake here. It's really, really good.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I understand why it's selling out every time you make it. Do you have any plans to increase your production, or are you going to stay with your current production size?
Yeah, actually, we are we keep expanding little by little each batch, and the next batch we will expand a little more again. And yeah, initially we were thinking about just moving to bigger location and having a tasting room inside, but because of this pandemic thing, we kind of like a little bit backed off and we changed our plan, and we kind of decided to stay in the same location, but keep expanding our production scale little by little.
Yeah. So maybe you can tell us how people can get in touch with you if they're interested in learning more about your sake, and if they want to order your sake, what's the best way to get their hands on some Den for themselves?
Okay. Like I said, we started shipping within California direct from Den Sake Brewery. So people who live inside California, you can go to our website, densakebrewery.com, and you can order through that. And if you live outside of California, like a place like Umami Mart in Oakland or True Sake in San Francisco, they ship outside California.
And for listeners at home, that's exactly how we got our hands on the sake.
That's great. Yeah.
And we'll have all that in the tasting notes. So you can visit sakerevolution.com, and we'll have all the links for you to visit Den Sake Brewery website and get the sake for yourself.
That's great. Thank you so much, guys.
Yoshi, thank you so much for joining us and giving us a little insight into how your brewery came about and what you guys are up to and what you're all about over there. The sake is very delicious. I really like this. This is nice.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's really great. We appreciate you taking the time so much. And thank you again so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Yoshi, so much. And thank you to all our listeners for tuning in. We really do hope that you're enjoying our show. If you'd like to show your support for Sake Revolution, one way you could really help us out would be to take a couple of minutes and leave us a written review on Apple Podcasts. It's really one of the best ways you can help us get the word out about our show.
And please also make sure to subscribe wherever you download your podcast so you don't miss a single episode. And while you're at it, tell a friend and get them to subscribe. We don't want them to miss an episode either.
And as always, if you want to learn more about any of the topics or any of the sake we talked about in today's episode, all you have to do is visit our website, sakerevolution.com, and check out our detailed show notes.
And if you have sake questions that you need answers, topics you want us to discuss, sakes you want us to drink, North American brewers you want us to interview, we want to hear from you. Reach out to us at feedback@sakerevolution.com. So until next time, please remember to keep drinking sake and kanpai.